Hey everybody, it's Lavender Town, and today I'm going to be talking about the expectation versus the reality of being an artist and artist stereotypes. So to start off, the first thing I'm going to talk about is how it actually feels to be an artist. There's this perception, I think, when people, especially who don't draw, hear about professional artists and people who draw all the time as their job. I think a lot of those types of people often think that art and making art and drawing and painting and doing all of that is always fun and it's always relaxing. I think a lot of people believe that when you're drawing for a job, you're not really working at all because it's like something that is considered easier or more enjoyable than most other types of work. There's this perception that like when you're an artist and you're working on something, you're just sort of like having a good time. And while that can definitely be true, I've certainly found, especially after I started doing this professionally, that is not always the case. Just as often as you have those days where you're just like loving life and loving everything you draw, there's just as many or more days where like everything you turn out is just not working for you and you have to do it anyway. So yeah, I think a lot of people don't understand that it's really labor intensive, it's frustrating, and it's difficult at times, just like any other job. I do think there's this like sort of idealistic idea about what it's like to paint for a living or draw for a living or sculpt for a living or whatever it is, that it's just like always fun and is something that shouldn't be considered like real work. And I certainly know that with some people, if you tell them that you've been working on comics all day or drawings all day, that they won't feel like you've been working. The next artist stereotype that I want to talk about is the idea that artists are always super poor. And this is something that is really, really prevalent. I hear this all the time, and I get a lot of emails and messages and asks on Tumblr from young people who are asking me like if art is financially viable and what to tell their parents, who are telling them basically that if they decide to go for art, that they're going to be living in poverty and they'll like be suffering and it will just be like sort of impossible to make a living at it. That like if you decide to be an artist, that money will always be a problem and you just have to like prepare to like suffer out on the streets if that's something you want to pursue. But the good news here is that actually the expectation is much worse than the reality. Again, just like any other job, depending on your skill level and depending on how serious you are about it, how hard you are willing to work, you have sort of an equal chance of anyone else in any other job to live properly and make enough money to survive no problem. It's really a strange sort of belief that like there's no work in art and there's no way to make money on art, because actually like knowing how to draw is a skill that takes a super long time to obtain, right? And with most things, if you have a skill that's kind of less common and it takes a long time to obtain, people are willing to pay you when they need art because it's much easier and faster to pay someone who knows how to draw than it is to invest 10 or 20 years into trying to learn to draw yourself. It really is a skill like any other that you deserve to be paid for if you put the time in on, and you will actually make money on art if that's something you're serious about and you pursue it really aggressively. There's no reason to think that you'll be living in a box outside if you decide to go for art seriously. And that's something I really try to tell people, especially young people who are thinking about going into art. I mean, it's definitely not a get rich quick kind of job, but it is a job that people can survive on. There's, in fact, tons and tons of jobs and tons of ways that artists can make money now. You can also kickstart projects, you can open up a Patreon, and there's tons and tons of places where art is regularly needed. You can be a freelancer, you can be someone who does like logos and designs, you can be an animator. There's like a million different ways and jobs that can support artists for their whole lives. So that is something that is just not necessarily true. The next stereotype I want to talk about is something that comes up a lot, especially at art school, but this is just sort of a belief I see in general, and especially when something's really strange or creative. I see a lot of people saying stuff like, wow, this person must have been on drugs when they drew this, or something to that effect, or just referencing drugs in general when they see some kind of art that's like really unusual or super creative. And there is this sort of belief that artists are often into drugs and stuff like that, and even alcohol and that kind of thing, because I think a lot of people connect that with creativity, and I think a lot of people expect artists to be doing a lot of that in their time and while they work. But and that might be true for some artists for sure, and in fact all of these stereotypes can be true sometimes. But I found when I was at art school and I was surrounded by artists all the time that a lot of the people I was spending time with actually don't do drugs at all, or even drink alcohol or do any of the normal college kid things, because they're so busy drawing. In fact, most of the kids in my class were pretty classic nerds, honestly. When they did have free time, they'd rather spend it like playing video games and, of course, drawing for fun, which didn't leave anybody with a lot of time to go out and do that kind of stuff. So they really weren't as wild as I think a lot of people would believe art students are. They spent a lot of time doing stuff like playing D&D or watching cartoons, that kind of thing, which is it's pretty opposite of what the sort of I think the expectation is of what an art student or someone who's really into art might be into, because yeah, you'd be surprised how prevalent this concept is that like every artist gets their ideas from drugs and stuff. I mean, and that goes back a long ways. There are writers like Byron who are well documented, like alcoholics who used to drink like laudanum and stuff. So there is definitely a connection there. But just in my personal experience, I found that the people I was spending time with at school who were doing a lot of art and having super creative ideas were just kind of doing that on their own. They didn't need any sort of substance to help them with that. So take from that what you will. I'm not trying to be the DARE program or anything. It was something I noticed. And on the topic of people thinking that artists are super wild, I would also say that one of the biggest stereotypes I see about artists is that they look really weird, that they tend to be super wacky, and like the way they dress and present themselves is always really crazy. And while of course there are many artists who like to look super crazy and experiment with like styles that most people wouldn't be willing to, I would say there's an equal amount of people, again, at least at my school, who look totally normal like any other type of person. So you'll see, like, just as much as I saw like crazy piercings and colored hair, I also saw just as many people with like their natural hair color and a hoodie on and jeans. And I always found it was like kind of a interesting thing, because when me and my friends would walk around the connected campus that had like EMT and culinary students and just people who are not in art careers, some of the people I would walk with would blend right in to this more generalized college crowd, and then some of the people would stick out like a sore thumb and be very clearly an art student. But the fact of the matter is that you can't tell just by looking at someone if they're an artist. That's what I've learned from that. And obviously I'm not a great example of this because I have pink hair and I do tend to wear stuff that's like a little bit weird, I think. But yeah, it's definitely something that's not true all of the time. It's not like every single person you see who is really into art is going to very clearly express some weird style that they're into or be super out of the box with how they present themselves. And I actually think that's pretty great. There was like a lot of discussion about that when I was at art school. There were people who were kind of trying to start up some sort of debate about like whether or not you should look like an art student, so to speak. And I know there was people who thought that like they just wish that everyone looked normal, and then there were other people who thought they wish that everyone looked more interesting, like more crazy style-wise. And personally, I think it was good that there's a mix of both, because obviously it's it's cool to see people with crazy out of the box stuff, but it's also cool to see people who sort of just do whatever. And yeah, I don't know, it's good to have different types of people in your school and in the art world. So I think they're both fine, but yeah, not everyone is super obviously an artist. The last thing I want to talk about is kind of an important one. This one's a little bit heavier than the other ones, I feel like, but I think it's really important. Is this idea that artists are sort of doing things for themselves and that they don't contribute more largely to society. This is kind of a sad one, but it is something that a lot of people, I think, believe, and even sometimes artists themselves believe this, that like, art is not something important, it's something that they just, they're doing selfishly or something like that. And that's sort of a belief that, yeah, a lot of people tend to have, and they see, that's where all the sort of concepts of like parents being disappointed in their kids or worried about their kids going to art school and that kind of thing might come in. Yeah, it's just basically that the idea that like making art is sort of a solitary thing that just sort of only benefits one person, and again, like you can't support yourself on that because it is something that is just for you. And I would just say that like that's, in my experience, artists are not like that at all. Almost every artist that I have met desperately wants to like use art to communicate to others or to show people something, to show people outside of themselves something. And not to mention the fact that like there are so many things in our world that are better because they've been, like they have art in them or some kind of design or something like that. So like, for example, like, whenever you're walking around and you see like a billboard or a magazine cover, like someone's had to design that. And like anytime you see a wallpaper, someone's had to design that. And like, obviously every children's book that you see that's illustrated, every cartoon that you watch has been worked on by dozens and dozens of artists, sometimes even hundreds. So, and I find that like most of the artists, again, that I talk to are not doing it just for themselves. They're not being totally solitary. They actually want other people to see it. It's really important for them that their work reaches other people. So I think the idea that it's sort of solitary and doesn't benefit others is pretty like opposite of the truth. I feel like out of out of a lot of different types of jobs, being an artist is one of the ones where it seems like reaching out to others is one of the most important parts of the job. Those were some of the most prevalent stereotypes that I've seen, most of which are not entirely true. I guess like most stereotypes, I mean, with any kind of generalization, I think usually it tends to be a bit more complicated than a lot of people believe. Have you guys encountered any of these stereotypes, and are there any others that bother you? I think there's probably more that I'm not thinking of. Those were just the main 5 that came to mind. And yeah, I'm sorry that this video is a little bit later than I'd usually like. I am moving and it is super hectic, so I hope you guys will be patient with me while that's going on. And yeah, I hope you guys have a super great day today, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye. Big thank you to my patrons, new and old, including Paynamel, Adrian Delport, Muffins McGee, Vilka, Christy Stewart, Cal Pompon, Super Pixel, Aiden Rhinoceros, Angela Taylor, Hallman Kearney, Heart Sprinkle, Violet Wilkes, Chartype, Den, Addie Visual, Juan Alvarez, Le Blah Blah Blah, at Live Likes to Draw, and Kate Meekins. Thank you guys so much for your support. I really appreciate it. If you are interested in becoming a patron, check out the link below. I've added some more YouTube-focused rewards recently, so if you've seen it before, but you haven't seen it since I added those, you should check it out.